A well-behaved woman is trim and proper. Chores always done, not a hair out of place. When the husband comes home, she greets him with a smile.
I'm sorry, what the fuck?
Are you tired of Hitler?
I feel no shame.
Okay, one liar as a kid can find another liar.
I want that stricken from the record.
How else is she gonna learn if she doesn't have a feather?
I can butt fuck in the big house.
You're a mess, girl. I am here to audition for Babysitters Club extras.
I brought my own hammer. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Well Behaved Women, a podcast where every week, every Friday, our host Lauren gives us a new tale of a woman from throughout history. So whether she's doing it for good, doing it for bad, she's going to tell us all the nitty gritty, and she'll be telling us, myself, Hannah, and our host B. And this week we also have our other host, Adam, who is a host. He has his own podcast, and he's coming to help us out with Bill Hickok.
So yeah, my podcast is called Murder Hobos. It is about sort of cultures of toxic masculinity throughout history, and I focus on the first season has 10 men. Well, at least most of them are probably men, and we talk about sort of cultures of masculinity and how those cultures influence men to behave especially violently through those things. So one of my episodes is about Wild Bill Hickok, and that's why I'm here to talk about Wild Bill and kind of the history of the Old West as it relates to our subject today.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, this was a lot of fun. I had a ton of fun in the first episode too. This has been a blast.
And this will be no different.
Yeah. This might even have more blasting than the first
I was
one.
going to say.
It's definitely going to have more blasting than in the first one, and we're going up against 50,000 shots. So
yeah. Well, most of them are going to miss though. Don't worry about it.
I was going to say.
They stormtroopered off.
0.2%.
Yeah.
Is it 0.2 or is it 0.02%?
It was 0.2%. So 0.2 of 1%.
They horrible.
It's not good.
So when last we left Calamity Jane, she had earned her name. She was apparently a scout, dealing with these different battles and kind of corralling people and protecting people and getting all sorts of into some secret scouting shit, whatever it was that she did. Or she worked as a laundress and, went and worked as a laundress on scientific expeditions or in towns where people were squatting or whatever.
Yeah, she was scrubbing out grass stains, blood stains, and picking up all the information so she could craft these stories.
You know what? Maybe she was a laundress in the
hole.
field because she was the one that knew how to do the laundry and get out all the blood stains.
Potentially.
Canon.
Sure.
Done.
We figured it out.
So we are back. She has spent some time recovering from her 90-mile river swim.
Oh, yes.
And if we can assume that this 90-mile top speed winter river trip is the truth, when she got better, she went back to Fort Laramie and she joined a wagon train that was headed towards a place called Deadwood, South Dakota.
Hey!
Definitely hopped on this train to Deadwood. It's very well documented. Everyone agrees by the time that she showed up, and by that point, she was very well known as Calamity Jane. She was kind of a little bit of infamous in her own right. She met such silly sounding characters as California Joe and Valentine McGillicuddy.
Oh my God, Valentine McGillicuddy.
The doctor himself.
Actually, I think he was like a doctor or a dentist or something like that. Anyway, it was during that time she also met a man who would change the course of her reputation forever. A man named James Butler Hickok. Adam, would you like to give us a semi-Reader's Digest on who this guy was, why he was famous, and just exactly how hot on the Adam Franti hotness scale was he?
So that's obviously the most important question, of course, and we'll get to it. But so James Butler Hickok by 1876 was better known as Wild Bill Hickok, and this was a reputation that he had sort of had been wearing since at least 1867. In 1867, there was this massive, it's like a 25-page long massive article that was written about him in Harper's Monthly, the Harper's Magazine, which was like, it had like millions of readers at the time. I mean, it was basically like having your own HBO prestige TV show. Like everyone knew about it, everyone talked about it, and this is what made him famous. But of course, like the Harper's article is all about gunfights and feuds and brawls and knifing bears on the trail and fighting unscrupulous like Confederate raiders and whatnot. And it talked about his upbringing in Illinois. So in 1876, he's about 36. He's still pretty young, but he was losing his vision. And he had tried and really hated being part of sort of Wild West shows, right? And because even in 1876, there's this palpable sense that the West is closing, right? All of these kind of great unexplored territories are being parceled up. They're being sold. There's ranchers now who are competing against homesteaders, and it's closing up. And this Harper's article, it kind of put Wild Bill in the spotlight of all this. Like he sort of physically kind of represented the West. And part of this reputation was just because he was literally a gunslinger. He's like the prototypical gunslinger. He was, by pretty much every account, an absolute deadeye. He shot several men to death, both in just personal feuds and as a lawman. He worked as a lawman in at least 3 different cities. There's Monticello, Iowa, or not Monticello, Iowa, sorry. I think Monticello, Kansas, Hays City, Kansas, and then Abilene, Kansas, which was probably his most famous post.
Question. What would it take for him to become a sheriff or a lawman in all of these different towns? Was it a rigorous process or
no?
Not really.
Oh, okay, I didn't think so.
So one of the things I talk about in my podcast, actually in a couple of episodes, is sort of the they don't really there's not really much law enforcement in this period. Like even in big cities, like Boston and New York have municipal police and whatnot, and they're kind of acting more like what we expect modern police to be. But like out in somewhere like Hays City, you have a lawman. Their job isn't to like go give tickets for people or like to they work for the court. Their job is to like serve papers of the court. They collect on fines that are issued, things like that. But their job is to keep the peace. And so keeping the peace is a very different thing than enforcing the law, right? And it creates very, very different sort of patterns of behavior and expectations from like a legal standpoint. So when Hickok left Abilene, he left Abilene because Abilene, Kansas was like, well, we don't need a sheriff anymore. So they dissolved the post. They didn't have one at all. And that tells you so much about the way they approached peacekeeping and law enforcement, because like it would, like, imagine reading the paper. Imagine reading a paper today and the paper says that like a city fired all of its police. They didn't have law enforcement there anymore. Right?
That's
and they just said, we don't need
Colorado
it.
Springs is on the verge of that right now.
Are they?
Yeah.
They're on the verge of being uninsurable because they have so many abuse of force cases.
Oh God.
Wow.
Yeah. They're damn near uninsurable.
Yeah. So, it's, we've all grown up in a place where we basically live in a police state, right? Like that's part of, like, that's how it's designed, and that's how it works. And it very much wasn't the case even in violent towns like Abilene, because Hickok's job is to be a tough guy. He's there to be like, if you get out of line and start being violent, I'll kill you. That's his job, right? And so like it's like way worse than modern policing in some ways, but it's also like not nearly as officious, right? Or official or necessary, right? So like the fact that he was just kind of known as a tough guy and a guy who's quick with his gun did as much to keep the peace as anytime he actually had to use the gun, right? And it like part of this inflated reputation comes from this Harper's article where he really boasts about like getting into a fight where he killed 10 men, some of them with a knife and some of them just by wrestling. And like, we know the facts was like maybe 3 people actually died, and Hickok may have shot a guy from behind a curtain rather than like emptying his pistol and then like grabbing his knife and having this like knife fight in this smoky room.
What a very different fight that was.
Yeah, does the real story really matter?
Hey, with no witnesses, who's going to tell me he's wrong?
So there was a court case about it. Like, we have court records about it. And so like we pretty much know exactly what happened, but so it's similar to Calamity in the fact that like Hickok himself is a big part of making his own reputation. And part of this is because like by 1867 he's working as a lawman, right? And like having this reputation out there, everybody's got their copy of Harper's, is like, wait, that's the guy. That's the guy that got into the shootout with Dave Tutt. He shot him at 75 paces, right? And so like that's a big part of kind of making this sort of legend, is like if the legend is out there ahead of you, then that's going to head off trouble before it starts. But then also it creates this like classic sort of Western film sort of thing where it's like you've got the famous gunman and everybody wants to be the guy that takes him down.
It's like Batman for the West.
And then
in a different, very different way.
Tombstone.
Well, you also have these things that end up stacking on each other because a lot of people really liked to tell stories. So even if they're just meeting this guy and having just an encounter with this guy, they're not going to just want to say that they just, were behind Wild Bill Hickok in line at the bar. They're going to want to say, oh, me and Wild Bill, we palavered all night. We got drunk and, we did this adventure, and it doesn't.
I was tied to the train.
Adventurous character, so you can't just have a normal interaction with an adventurous character. You got to have a whole thing, and that builds on the legend that has already been established.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not just the stories he told; it's the stories told by other people as well. Just for him having been in town.
Yeah, it's the telephone game and the domino effect all together.
Yes.
I love that game.
Yeah.
And you've still got that element of like one-upping, like, well, if you did a thing here, I did a thing that was even cooler. I did that thing and I did this other thing, and you don't even know about it. You're not part of that secret club.
You weren't there. You had to be there.
And so
she doesn't even go
obviously, most importantly, everyone who saw him, and you can look at, there's photographs of him and everything. He's obviously a very striking looking guy.
He has a face.
He was, by all accounts, incredibly hot. And I think one of my favorite descriptions of how good looking he is.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up now.
One guy described him as having the shoulders of Hercules and the waist of a girl.
Whoa!
Right? So
a swimmer's body.
Got this kind of almost like effeminate sort of ideal. And Libby Custer, the wife of George Armstrong Custer, was like very taken with him, and there were some jealousies between George Custer and George Custer's brother and Hickok.
Look at those beautiful long locks.
Whoops.
Oh yeah.
And it's sort of hard to get a sense of it though, because a lot of the
hat.
I love it. And his big old mustache.
The one right to the left of your mouse, that one. I can see it in this one. The very debonair kind of, I don't know.
That was probably
reminds me of Billy the Kid almost.
Yeah. That was probably the first photograph of him. That's when he's youngest. That's like, I think like just before the Civil War. That's like 1861.
Oh,
so that's
so
the youngest
far
photo
before.
of him.
Yeah. So then around this time, which photo I guess would be like when he said 1867-ish, when he's a sheriff.
Yeah. He's about here, right?
Okay.
About that, yeah.
Okay.
And then the a couple of the ones without his hat are sort of mid 1870s.
Okay. Still a good-looking man. Look at that mustache.
This guy, look at that pose. Strike a pose.
Yep.
That's crazy.
And I really wish that there'd been like video photography of him, because a lot of the descriptions of his handsomeness and his beauty have a lot to do with how he moves and how just like graceful and just clean and efficient all of his movements were. And like Libby Custer has a whole thing about watching him dismount his horse.
Yeah.
And like I would love to have seen like video of Hickok just doing anything, just moving around, mounting a horse, something like that, just to kind of get the sense of like movement and grace.
Well, because it says a lot about a person.
Yeah,
it does. Like
enough
the
so that multiple people remark on it.
Yeah.
So would you say he had 1860s swagger?
Oh, for sure.
Love it.
So this is a picture of, just real quick, since I'm already on the internet, this is a picture of her in her little military uniform, or in her scouting uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is her in a dress, which she really wasn't seen much of. Okay.
Wow.
Anyway.
The hat.
Yeah, so he's hot and he is
Yeah.
very well accomplished, and he is like kind of this guy of legend, and with every interaction the legend gets bigger.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Enter Calamity.
Calamity.
They're going off to Deadwood. Adam, why are they going to Deadwood?
So Deadwood, we talked about a little bit in the last episode. Deadwood was a gold mining town. There was a gold boom in the Black Hills.
Yeah.
So
Ooh,
Custer had
yeah.
actually done a survey of Yellowstone, basically the whole area, and had found gold in the Black Hills and sort of published it. And pretty much overnight, gold prospectors started flooding the Black Hills. And the way that sort of worked was everybody has a stake, right? That's kind of where the term comes from. You stake a claim. And the gold claims were all, you get a little narrow frontage of the river, and you get control of the space sort of in between that and some other kind of geographic boundary. And everything on that is yours to work. And anyone who shows up gets one for free. They stake it out. It's all the same size. And so this is everybody kind of knew this is just how it works. So you need like lawmen and stuff. Usually it was just like you and your buddies get armed and go confront people who are doing things like claim jumping, who are like, you go to the bar to cash in your gold dust and somebody starts working your claim, right? That kind of thing happened. But it was all self-policed because everybody's there because they agree everyone gets a stake, everyone has a fair shot at getting rich, right? And then the smarter people show up and start working hardware stores or selling pots and pans to people or running a saloon or doing things that these gold miners and stuff need to have. And that a lot of that is like laundry, food, entertainment, sex work, that kind of thing.
And all things that Jane could have done.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. And so
Yes.
Hickok had just been married to Agnes Lake, who again was running a successful circus at the time. And he claimed that his reason for going to Deadwood was to stake out a claim, be a prospector, make some gold, and establish some money for his family. He also went there with another guy named Colorado Charlie Utter, who by all accounts was just as hot and just as dandified as Wild Bill was.
Couple of dandies.
Oh my God. Say his
Wait,
can you say his name one more time?
It's Colorado Charlie Utter. Charlie Utter.
Colorado Charlie Utter.
Yeah.
Just gonna see if there's any record.
Oh, probably.
You'll probably see photos of Dayton Callie, who played Charlie Utter in Deadwood.
Yeah,
I see.
Dayton Callie's great,
there he is.
and his performance as Charlie Utter is awesome. But it's like I kind of wish they had a guy who's a bit more of a dandy on the show. But like I love his character on Deadwood, but it is a little bit different from
wait, but there's a photo.
He doesn't quite
here.
have the facial hair. Yeah.
I just see a photo here of definitely Wild Bill Hickok and a guy next to him that potentially could be. I'm going to pretend, and you know what, canon, that's Charlie.
Yeah,
exactly.
Colorado Charlie right there. But
There you go.
Okay. All right, sorry. Where were we?
No, you're fine. We're back at it again. It's the summer of 76. And suddenly Calamity has this new buddy. She's met this guy who can drink at her pace. He can tell tall tales that are taller than hers. He can build on her stories, and they will just tell each other and drink each other under the table all night long.
He's smoking.
They can shoot. They can ride. They're basically just two peas in a fucking pod, instant little besties, a very kindred spirit.
Love it.
They get to Deadwood. They spend all summer drinking, laughing, telling tales, and Calamity this whole time is riding as a Pony Express mail delivery person between Deadwood and Fort Custer. This is the toughest trails that the Black Hills have to offer.
Yeah, so this was, these weren't established roads. These weren't like stagecoach roads or anything. Again, everyone who lives in Deadwood right now is living there illegally. So there's nothing like, they don't have the USPS there, right? So they have a mail route that's run by volunteers who get paid like $50 a ride. And that's what Calamity Jane does. So she takes parcels and mail and packages, and cash, and just rides it to the nearest fort, picks up any deliveries and mail and everything for the return trip, and comes back. And she boasts, I think, that she's able to do that in 2 days, which was pretty quick. Like, you can go look at the map and see the distance between like Deadwood and Fort Custer. It's quite a ways.
Have that quote. She does address the every 2 days. I have that quote. So
yeah.
In her own words, many riders before me had been held up and robbed of their packages. Mail and money that they carried, for that was the only means of getting mail and money between these points. It was considered the most dangerous route in the Black Hills, but as my reputation as a rider and quick shot was well known, I was molested very little, for the toll gatherers looked on me as a good fellow, and they knew I never missed my mark. I made the round trip every 2 days, which was considered pretty good riding in that country. I remained around Deadwood that summer, visiting all the camps within an area of 100 miles. My friend Wild Bill remained in Deadwood during the summer, with the exception of occasional visits to the camps.
So they were just so scared of her. They were like, we know we can't even hassle her for tolls.
We ain't gonna fuck with her.
Don't even try to rob her. You're just
She's gonna be here
die.
2 days anyway. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
okay.
And she's drinking so much. So apparently in June of 1876, I love this. Apparently in June of 1876, Calamity Jane got so drunk that she rented a horse and buggy in Cheyenne for a 1-mile joyride. She missed her turn and she ended up 90 miles away at Fort Laramie.
Oh, there's that 90 miles again.
90 miles. I maybe that's just her unit of measurement.
It could be. Or she could be like me. I speak hyperbolically, and every time I'm like going extreme. I'm kind of amping it up. I go, it's like it's 8 million miles or 8 million.
I think Cheyenne and Fort Laramie are
80
90 miles apart.
Well, okay. Well, okay. I definitely believe that she would get too drunk and go on a joyride. So I won't even question the 90 miles this time.
Probably had the bottle of whiskey with her, and she was just like, you know what, this is a nice night. Like maybe it's a little bit long of a ride, but like, I'm fine.
Yeah. That or she invented the flask and had it with her at all times.
Yeah.
I think the flask had well and truly been invented by this point.
Oh, very likely. But she'll claim that she invented it.
It was called a canteen, but yes, it had been.
But then, in August, something happened. Adam, would you like to tell the story of the poker game?
Poker game.
So Hickok, as I said before, Hickok claimed that he was going to Deadwood to stake out a claim and work as a prospector. And he may have been intending to, but what he did when he was there for the 6 weeks, that was that he was in Deadwood. He played poker. That's it. That's all he did. He played poker from saloon to saloon to saloon, just playing poker all the time. And in one case, this was the night before he was killed, or maybe a day or so before. He was playing with a guy named Jack McCall. Jack McCall got super duper drunk and just lost everything. And at the end of the morning, when the game was wrapping up, Hickok gave him $1 so that he could get a bite to eat. And apparently, according to McCall, this greatly insulted him because he felt like Hickok was giving him charity. And so he went off to stew for a while. Oh. And Hickok, in the meantime, went to sleep. Next day, he started playing poker again, went long into the night. And in the morning on August 2nd, McCall, having purchased a firearm, walked into the number 10 saloon, and Hickok was sitting in a seat he normally didn't sit in. There's a whole story about how he came in and asked the guy who was sitting in his seat, which was against the wall, so he could look at both doorways, to move, and the guy refused to move. And so he sat in a different chair with his back to the door, to the main thoroughfare. And so McCall walked in. Hickok didn't even see him coming. He walked up right behind him, said, "Take that, goddamn you," and shot him in the back of the head. And Hickok died obviously instantly. The bullet actually went through his head and lodged into the wrist of the guy who's sitting in his chair. And that guy had that bullet in his wrist for the rest of his life because the doctors couldn't take it out. And that was another way he got free drinks probably for the rest of his life.
Oh, right? I'm sure.
This was in Wild Bill.
Yeah, this is the bullet.
Yeah. So there's this famous story about how Hickok had the winning hand. He had 2 pair aces and eights, and that's sort of in poker lore and in Wild West lore. That's called the dead man's hand, because that was the hand that Wild Bill had when he got shot to death. So there's a there's some politics involved in this, and there's all sorts of other kind of high drama. But yeah, he just straight up walked into the number 10 saloon and murdered him.
Well, fuck that guy.
Yeah,
That's the poker game.
That's all I can
he's
say.
yeah.
Damn.
no honor.
Over I mean, I guess, yes, high stakes. He's drunk and he lost everything. But
Yeah.
to just
But
think
then he has,
you're
like-
insulted by somebody giving you charity, you just lost everything to gambling.
And part of this too is like, so there's in sort of the Western canon, right? People who kill famous gunmen generally do it from behind, right?
Yeah.
And so they're generally called like the coward. So there's the coward Robert Ford who killed
I've heard
Jesse
that
James,
term.
and there's the coward Jack McCall who killed Wild Bill Hickok. And so part of the story might be a result of the trial that Jack McCall had, because he had to have a reason to murder Wild Bill. And, you know, so making up the story that, he felt so insulted having been given this charity like he needed it from Wild Bill was, you know, insult beyond the pale, and he had to have recompense, right? But the way you do that is through a duel, not through murder.
Yeah.
You know, so there's
Definitely
you know,
a coward.
there's a sense of like using the sort of mythic story to like get off from a murder charge, right? Saying like, I'm doing it out of revenge, or I'm doing it because I was insulted, or what have you. And so even Jack McCall is playing into this sort of notoriety because he wants to be the famous guy who killed Wild Bill, but he also doesn't want to be hanged for it. So
yeah, he wants to live to see the tale spread.
Right.
Wow.
So Calamity obviously wasn't very happy about this. She was pissed that her friend had died. According to her, I at once started to look for the assassin and found him at Shardy's butcher shop and grabbed a meat cleaver and made him throw up his hands, because through the excitement of hearing Bill's death, having left my weapons on the post of my bed. He was then taken to a log cabin and locked up, well secured as everyone thought. But he got away. So this trial in Deadwood he has, and Jack McCall is acquitted. They don't convict him of this murder. Adam Franti, Adam, I don't know why I'm still using the whole thing.
That's fine.
Adam says, kind of told us about the fact that like he has this specific defense. Well, it's this bullshit defense that he was, I guess, like years before. This was back when he was a sheriff or something.
Yeah, it would have been when he was in Abilene. Yeah,
so back in Abilene, Jack McCall's brother had been shot and killed by James, by Wild Bill. And that this shooting was in revenge to that. Obviously, you can't have that, but whatever.
Yeah.
But they don't convict him. They release him. And then local newspaper basically just says like, fucking, wow, if we ever kill a man, let our trial be in Deadwood. And McCall, not being in prison, not being convicted, he leaves, he takes off.
And so part of this was like, part of the acquittal is really interesting. And like Deadwood, the show explains this pretty well. And the concern was basically that like, so they're all very aware that this is an illegal camp. And if the United States annexes an illegal camp, it doesn't need to respect the property rights of the people who live there because they're all living there illegally. So there was concern that if they tried and convicted and hanged a man, even for something where it was his obvious guilt, that this would look to the United States government as if they were setting up a government in protest, and that would give them a reason to strip them all of their property when they annex the territory. So there is a story that there's the concern about this kind of political angle. So they acquitted him just so that they could say that like they don't need to have an argument saying why they hanged someone, right? Where they're not trying to be the United States. They're just a camp of illegal squatters. And so the story about revenge and a revenge killing is taken as justification because that's kind of like the common law, right? Like everybody's entitled to revenge is sort of the idea that they're kind of getting at. And it's like, we're not in the United States, so we don't have to, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting that they're that sort of perceptive and they're that careful about the way the story is spread, because they don't want to be kicked off land that they improved when the United States annexes the territory. And so like this is basically the TV show. This is sort of like the linchpin of like the whole first season, is these concerns about legitimacy and making sure they all keep their property when the annexation happens. And this is, by the way, only a few weeks after the Battle of Little Bighorn, where George Custer was killed. So this is all happening within a couple of months. And these are like two of like the Little Bighorn and the death of Wild Bill Hickok is like the signal that says like this is the end of the West. This is the end of the Wild West. And it's like the death of these two individual people. So like that sort of sense that like Wild Bill's body is the West is sort of cemented in this kind of like mythical canon.
The whole town showed up for his funeral. Like literally everyone in the squatters town showed up for this funeral. It was the biggest one that they had up to that point. People love this guy.
Damn.
Right. And it was, a lot of it was because, you know, it was Wild Bill. He had a, did the comic books start later?
They started around the same time. I think the earliest one I'm aware of is 1882. But
there
had already been
after.
Yeah, there had already been like pulp novels and stuff about other frontier legends. So like Hickok would have grown up reading about like Kit Carson and like Daniel Boone and other kind of frontier legends. So there were already like this kind of pulp adventure fiction that was already pretty popular. But stuff about Wild Bill was pretty much happening as he was still alive, and obviously kind of exploded in popularity after he died.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize they had comic books, so they made a little comic book.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I
were like
spoke ahead of my time.
There were pulp novels, and then they adapted the pulp novels in like the 20s
I see.
to be comic books for kids especially.
Okay, that's the missing link I was not getting. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's amazing though. I had no idea that there was like pulp novels already kind of circulating at that time with this essentially beginning pop culture in a way.
Yeah.
Oh,
truly. Jack McCall gets off of the, you know, kind of the, he gets, you know, he's able to take his revenge. So they're like, all right, fine, you can leave. Luckily, the law in the rest of the country doesn't really kind of work out that way. So he gets to Fort Laramie and then he is arrested again. Because Deadwood was part of Indian territory, that specific ruling didn't have any legal standing whatsoever. So McCall gets yanked back to Yankton, South Dakota, and he is tried and convicted for the murder of Wild Bill Hickok, and he is hanged in 1877.
Damn.
Yeah.
Good. Well, not good, but like glad that he had
Love
accountability. Yeah. Don't really know what to say when a man's hanged.
Good riddance.
You can say good. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Calamity, meanwhile, she's just trying to survive in Deadwood. She's tried her hand at prospecting, which was, again, the reason that Deadwood existed in the first place. It was a mining town, but she wasn't any good at it. But by that time, because they were such storytellers, stories about Calamity and Wild Bill start to get more abundant. And given the relative fame of Hickok at that time and the storytelling ability of Jane, the stories grew and they morphed. And soon, no one really exactly knew which stories were true and which had been exaggerated. But there were a lot of stuff for one summer. Like, they must have had a really busy summer. She's also friends with this woman named Dora Dufran, who was a famous madam in Deadwood. She is also, she was still thought to have, yes, madams are awesome. And we're going to do an episode on her at some point too. I like this whole kind of Old West theme.
Same.
There's a lot of badass here.
There's a lot in Denver too.
Yeah. They got a lot of them. Calamity was still thought to have been a sex worker off and on, or at the very least, she was a very popular lady with the fellas. There may have been money exchanged, or she may have been just getting her fuck on, you know, with
Getting
the
her
most
fuck on,
quote unquote, the most notorious desperados of the time.
Ooh,
Whoa.
like who? Drop some names, girl. Tell me.
Well, there was a rumor.
Rumor
The
has
Wild
it.
Bill got
Well,
her hooked up.
I kind of figured if they're besties, at this
Spending summer together.
time,
Yeah, rolling around. in the hearse.
he liked the way she wears her pants.
He liked the cut of her pants.
Yeah, he likes the cut of her jib. What's a
I like
jib?
it.
No,
That's a
cut
boat
Part of
part
the
thing.
ship.
Oh, okay, not
So-
her jib.
It comes from when you look at a ship and you see its sail pattern, you can
Uh-huh.
identify what type of ship it is and what business it has. So literally the
Oh.
cut of its jib, which held sails, would determine the use of the ship. And so you can see that from really, really far away.
Oh, super cool.
So
I
like
did
2
not
masts
know
versus
this.
3 masts versus 7.
Yep. Yep.
Right,
And it's
right.
like about like whether the sails are sort of sideways or forward, if that makes
Portrait,
sense, right? If you
landscape.
Because
got-
it's either built for
Yeah.
like big shipments or for agility, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Or for
Oh,
fighting, it
okay.
could be a gunship. There's
Yeah.
there's all kinds of different
They need to
silhouettes
be a
that
little
can
more
be
agile.
identified.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. Okay.
All right. So that's one of the
awesome.
desperados. Do we know any other desperados?
I can
think
look it up.
mostly the idea is that she's just sleeping with men in Deadwood, and men in Deadwood are the most notorious desperados in the country.
That's
okay.
exactly
I think
it,
is
yeah.
sort of the idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
the
Where it's
whole
like-
There's
idea is
background
that-
info, so she can start writing a smut fan fiction
Right.
series about Calamity
Yes,
Jane.
she can
I
write her
need
own
names
erotic
and
West
backstories.
novels.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's already dozens of them, but they could
50
use a
Shades of
comeback.
Jane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man.
So B, I sent you a direct message with a nice little quote.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Get your Western on.
Let me get my gun out. Hold on.
Hold your
Even
Winchester
still-
box.
Yeah, hey, it's over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even still, she was always up to some kind of antic. When the Lard players were at the East Lynn Opera House, Calamity sat with her rough and ready gunslinger friend, Arkansas Tom. Jane
it.
became enraged at the end of the play and stood up and let fly a long stream of tobacco juice, which hit the star square in the eye and dribbled down her dress. Jane's gunslinger boyfriend let out a whoop, and at this started to shoot out all of the lamps.
What?
As the crowd went wild with delight, Calamity took her gunslinging friend by the arm and they marched up the aisle together to the cheers of the crowd. Tom, unfortunately, would never see Jane again as he was cut down in a bank stick-up the following morning.
Okay, a lot happened here.
Yeah. That's quite
Where
a
do we
story.
start?
Bang, bang, bangity bang.
I said a
Bang,
bang, bang,
bangity
bangity
bang.
bang.
There it is.
So there's another
Uh.
interesting parallel with Wild Bill, because apparently when he was touring like around New York, his eyes were going, and he probably had like glaucoma, is what most people think, or he had
Oh.
really terrible problems with his eyes.
Yeah,
And part of the thing was that he was
degenerative
sensitive to light. So when he was on the stage, the limelights would like blind him. So apparently at one performance, he got so fed up with it that he shot the lights out, which meant that like he was on stage doing these gun tricks and everything with like a real loaded pistol.
Oh, God.
Likely an
Shot
audience.
the lights out and then kept going, like kept doing the
Like,
show.
aha, there it
in
is.
the
I can
dark.
see better now.
All right, stage left. Bang.
Yeah.
Throw a little
That's
twirl in
insane.
there just to make it
Right,
look good.
exactly.
So what did they mean when she started marching up the aisle?
She just like
What was-
dragged him like
in
up
the
the aisle,
audience.
arm in arm, like celebrity.
Hey!
Like, kinda
Okay,
like, hey, we
okay.
did
Yeah,
it.
showed him off. Showed
Yeah.
him off. I see. Okay.
Well,
I
just
was
They're
they're
gonna-
shooting
kind
out
of-
lamps as they go
They've
down
got
the
people
aisle.
laughing at this
Yeah.
point, like everyone's having a good time, so she's
Yeah.
rousting the crowd more.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. She's his hype man in this moment.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Then apparently there was just a bank robbery like the very next day.
The next
So who
day,
knows if
yeah.
that's true at all? Who knows if there was ever even an Arkansas Tom? Just
I guess I didn't
Well,
think of that.
That Arkansas Tom was made up? How
Colorado
could
Charlie
you?
was from Niagara, so who knows
Right.
where?
Yeah,
any
yeah,
of these
right,
people
right.
are.
Yeah.
I love how people are just named from the state that they're coming from or the state
Yeah,
that
they were-
they're
Wherever they were
living
going
in.
to.
I'm
They were
Missouri
most
Jane. You from
recently
Missouri?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you Illinois B?
Yeah, no, I'm Mississippi Joe, whatever.
Right.
Now I was in Virginia for a tag, so now I'm I'm Virginia Joe.
There you go.
Oh
See?
God.
You got it. Your
Formerly.
name will grow then, like every time you move your states.
Okay, cool. I have like
Ever
9
changing.
states in front of my name.
Oh God.
You're gonna
That's
start
not-
becoming the Khaleesi,
Oh, mother of states.
mother of states.
Just keep adding to your army.
Yeah.
So that year, the plague came to Deadwood, and so Calamity spent a lot of time nursing people back to health. Quote, even old Doc Babcock had to admit that there was a little angel of some sort in that hard-boiled woman. While tending to the children, the doctor said to her, she'd swear to beat the hell out of him, but it was a tender kind of cussing.
A tender kind of cussing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you've ever had a Southern grandma kind of cuss at you, like, you definitely know this fact.
Mhm.
Don't make me get the switch.
Oh.
And then there is
No,
switch,
I've been
they
lucky.
never actually beat
Right.
you.
Right.
It's made up.
Oh, it's always been made up. I thought it was
You work
real.
under threat of violence because they'll never actually get to the violence. Also,
Speak for
because
yourself.
The threat is enough.
All right, so she still did the mail thing. In her words, I remained around Deadwood, locating claims and going from camp to camp until the spring of 1877, when, one morning, I saddled my horse and I rode to Crook City. I had gone about 12 miles from Deadwood at the south of Whitewood Creek when I met the overland mail running from Cheyenne to Deadwood. The horses on the run about 200 yards from the station. Upon looking closely, I saw they were pursued by Indians. As the horses stopped, I rode alongside the coach and found the driver, John Slaughter, lying face downwards in the boot of the stage, he having been shot by the Indians. When the stage got to the station, the Indians hid in the bushes. I hurriedly removed all the baggage from the coach except the mail. I then took the driver's seat and with all haste drove to Deadwood carrying the 6 passengers and the head driver.
So she
rescued
saved
a wagon. I just rescued a little mail thing with a bunch of innocent passengers from the wild Indians.
So, and okay, so the. All right. I'm trying to wrap my head around. Yeah, a little
If
bit.
you've ever-
So
Essentially-
she's basically okay. So she's on this ride and she's just having a good time, and then she comes up on this wagon. So the wagons come in the opposite direction, and they're being chased by Indians. So she's like,
Okay,
these horses are out of control. I can't see the driver. So she turns her horse around. She catches up to them, and she gets to the carriage where she hops on to the wagon and gets hold of the reins. She looks over, and the driver is now
moving.
all the while it's moving. So she gets hold of these reins. She looks over. The driver is unconscious. He must have been hit with something. So she gets all of that.
No, she said he was shot.
I think she said he was shot.
So he was unconscious.
To the back of the carriage.
Something like that. And I mean, I would imagine there's more shots too. It's a whole thing. So they get to the station. She drops off the mail. She's carrying this guy in her arms.
Okay, so she did take the mail. All right, because I thought she said she left the mail.
Yeah.
Well, so she kind of gets
removed
that...
all the baggage except the mail. So the mail was important, but all the rest of the clothes and
she made room.
To make room. Okay. She had to make room for this guy. So she goes to Deadwood, and then she gets back there, and she literally takes the dead driver like into the town. But she outruns these Indians as they're chasing down this wagon.
So yeah, when you first started telling it, I thought you were saying that she helped one of like the people who was taking capture, like she was like carrying him down from the wagon, like, come here, little lady.
again, interpretation of like how you want to hear it. But this is a very action-filled scene.
If you've ever seen the movie Stagecoach, like super classic Western, right? There's this really classic shot of John Wayne. It was like, this is the movie that made John Wayne a star.
Okay.
It's this like this intense like rail zoom, right? Like right into John Wayne, and he like flips his Winchester around, like spinning it like the T-1000 from Terminator.
Oh god.
And he yells at the stagecoach to halt. So like I'm just like reskinning that in my mind as Calamity Jane doing this exact same thing. And then the rest of Stagecoach happens exactly the way it did.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And this is like a documented story. Other people told this story.
Yeah.
Okay, dang.
Yeah. So this
she
isn't
wasn't
just like
just
her telling
hyping
a story.
herself
This
up.
was like other people saw this happen at both the station and
Shoot.
in Deadwood.
Oh, she had
Yeah.
witnessed. She had receipts for this one.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
For this one.
Yeah, for this one.
For
But
this
good
one.
on you. This is an important one.
She gets back. She's doing all this shit. But Deadwood, after, you know, her buddy is gone, it just didn't have the same charm that it once had for Calamity. So in the fall of 1877, she left. She traveled. I don't know why I said that in quotes.
Yeah, she might have teleported for all we know.
Oh,
she
it's because it's about.
but she didn't go very far.
It's actually because it's about to be in a quotes, but there's some weird
Ah.
space anyway. So she, quote, traveled to Bear Butte Creek with the 7th Cavalry, where they built Fort Meade near the town of Sturgis. In 1878, she left the command and went to Rapid City, where she spent the year prospecting with little success. By early 1879, she was in Fort Pierre, driving mule trains to Fort Pierre and Sturgis. Again, we see the use of the mules in like large.
I was gonna say a mule train, so I'm assuming this just
Like a
mules
horse train.
pulling carts.
Yeah.
Well, mules loaded with like packs and baggage.
Rolls.
And
And you can rope them
Yeah.
to each other, so it's literally a little
Yeah.
train of mules.
Oh,
and
see, I
you,
thought.
you take the mules because they can get places where wheels can't. So you like.
I see.
So you know, if you're trying to pull a wagon up a mountain, you're going to lose the wagon. But if you just
gonna have
load
a bad
everything on the
time.
back of a mule, the mules can walk up the cliff. So it
I
was
see.
just
Okay.
another way to get stuff in really rugged areas.
Oh, cool.
I mean, and this is like I can't stress this enough. We kind of go through this whole thing, and this is like rocky, craggly, you
Mhm.
know,
Cliffsides.
not welcoming in any way, shape, or form. And every
Mhm.
once in a while there's a field, but then it goes back to fucking Mordor land. You know, like you're just am I wrong? Like in the winter, it's terrible up there. It's really
I've
I
never
wanna go
been
back
in the
to Shire,
winter.
Frodo. I'm scared.
there's a lot of rolling hills and stuff, but like there's a lot of mountains and there's a lot of really rocky areas that are super hard to get to.
Yeah.
And winter
I know
is hard.
Wyoming for
I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Montana just
I
is
wouldn't-
more of that.
Oh, it's more of that.
But
I've
more
never been to
mountainous. There's a
Montana.
lot more
Well, like think about the
craggly-
altitude too. If
some
you've ever
shit.
done like a 14er, the higher you go up, the
Oh,
more
yeah.
treacherous, you know, the cliffs
it
and
is.
the steepness of
And
the
they live
slopes
up there.
is, you know.
Yeah. Dang.
So by this point, she's more notorious than she's ever been. Her travels, her connection to her buddy Bill. Some people are even calling her the White Devil of Yellowstone. It's because
Whoa.
so by that time she had basically tried to settle a little bit in Yellowstone. So she buys this little house on the river. She's running it as like a little ranch and a bed and breakfast for like where wayfarers, people that are kind of coming through the town, that kind of thing. And then this is around the time when dime novels are starting to be written about her and her buddy Wild Bill. And they're just coming out. She's doesn't have a part in writing them. They're just being published. And obviously to keep that kind of serial type of idea going, they fictionalize a lot of adventures that Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane, all of the adventures that they got onto. Adam talked about the death of the Wild West. He put it really well in his Wild Bill episode. This is a woman out of her time and element, a storyteller at this point with very few people to tell the story to anymore. She's kind of just surviving.
In 1881, I went to Wyoming and retired in 1882 to Miles City and took up a ranch on the Yellowstone, raising stock and cattle. Also kept a wayside inn where the weary traveler could be accommodated with food, drink, or trouble if he looked for it. Left the ranch. I can't do an accent. I'm trying so hard. Left the ranch in 1883 and went to California through the states and territories. Reached Oregon the latter part of 1883 and San Francisco in the summer of 1884. Damn, she's all over the place. Then left for Texas, stopping at Fort Yuma, the hottest point in the U.S. Stopped at all points of interest until reached El Paso in the fall.
All right, can I just pause real quick and say,
Yes.
Do you think it's physical hottest, or do you think that there were just super hot people there? Like the
I mean,
hottest.
It could be. It could be. I'm going to go for the temperature side of it because
Fair.
if she's in Texas, it's already hot by what? She
It
say
is
August.
hot as balls.
Oh, wait.
Texas is super fucking hot, okay?
Yeah,
it's
it's
hot.
bad. It's
And the
very
further
bad.
south you go, the worse it gets.
Yeah, then she went to El
What?
Paso,
Nuh-uh.
yeah, in the fall. So I mean, it's
Have
probably
you
getting
been
a
to
little
Corpus
nicer.
Christi? That is Satan's asshole. USA.
No, I have not been there. I can definitely be glad to say I have not been in Satan's
It is
butthole.
hot and muggy.
It's just as wrinkly too.
Think
All
about that
right.
sweaty ass.
Ugh,
Mhm.
I don't
Everything's sticky all the time. Oh yeah.
I'm good on that.
No, I can definitely relate to that. You just touch yourself, you're like, sticky on the arms. Just no, don't look at me like that.
At least El Paso is dry. Okay, so she's in
All
El
right.
Paso.
When in El Paso, I met Mr. Clinton Burke. I just saw Mr. Clinton and I was like, liar or fortune teller. When in El Paso, I met Mr. Clinton Burke, a native of Texas who I married in 1885, as I thought I had traveled through life long enough alone and thought it was about time to take a partner for the rest of my days. We remained in Texas, leading a quiet life until 1889. On October 28th, 1887, I became a mother of a baby girl, the very image of its father. At least that's what they said. But who had the temper of its mother? When we left Texas, we went to Boulder, Colorado. Sorry, I got excited. Boulder, Colorado, where we kept a hotel until 1893, after which we traveled through Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, then back to Montana, and then to Dakota, arriving at Deadwood, October 9th, 1895, after an absence of 17 years. So she just nonstop moved around. I don't think she could get out of that state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason she moved around so much?
I think you already nailed
Got
it. I
bored
think
in
she
one
just
place.
was used to it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Transience
Hey,
was her thing. She
So-
could pack light, and she literally just anywhere that would offer her a drink or a smoke and a place to tell a
Yeah.
tale. She was like, all
I mean,
right,
her
that
literal
sounds
whole
cool. Let's
life
go.
was moving around. I can imagine
Yeah.
it would be difficult for her to settle down anywhere.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Now, in Boulder, Colorado, there's an inn or a hotel that they kept until 1893. There is a historic hotel there. Is it the Hotel Boulderado?
I have no idea.
All right, that's
got
a side note, but if anybody knows, that would be great.
It depends. I mean, if it could have been demolished a long time ago.
True. That's also true.
So
Mhm.
she goes to Boulder. They're dealing with a bed and breakfast. And they get back to Deadwood in 1895.
They're back for the movie.
Or
Or
she got married in Wyoming to a guy named Bill Steers who beat the fuck out of her in Wyoming, which is a whole different story. Maybe she had, maybe she was with both of them at one point.
Sounds like Bill steered her in the wrong direction.
It sounds like Bill Steers is kind of full of shit. I like
I
it.
just got that.
Took you a second, didn't you? So if true that she was with Bill, she had a baby boy who died in infancy and a daughter that lived into the 1960s. She might have had 2 daughters. She might have had 4. I just don't know.
idea.
Mm.
One story, though, is that when she gets back to Deadwood, she comes back with a girl that she says is her daughter. She's famous in that town already, so she's able to put together this fundraiser to send the daughter to a nearby Catholic boarding school. She's like,
Okay.
I need to send my kid to school. Great. Okay.
We're going to set up a GoFundMe.
Basically, yes. So
Yeah.
she shows up and then she immediately enlists the help of Deadwood. Be like, look at me, I'm Calamity Jane. I need money. Don't you
Remember
wanna help
me?
out? Remember me? Exactly.
Yeah.
The fundraiser is a massive success. They get the funds plus some. And then Jane spends the night drinking it away.
Oh, Jane.
She didn't spend all of it,
No.
but she spent most of it.
Bad
Sweet.
mom.
The woman who tells the story thought Jane really actually did want to send her daughter to school. It was just that Calamity didn't have any sense of self-control, nor was she really able to follow through with long-term plans.
Uh-oh. Does she
Sounds
sound
like a
like someone
functioning
I know?
alcoholic to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's not good.
So this phase of her life is pretty mysterious, and a lot of it is because she was away from kind of the place that she was known. If she had been in that area, they probably would have been able to document it a little more easily, but because she was gone, it was like, this is just what she's telling us, or someone that wanted to say that they had a connection to her has decided to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
We know all of these stories. We do know that she toured around the country and really, I mean, she could have been in like 3 different places at 5 different times. And so she's touring the country. She's trying to tell her stories to anyone who will listen. And basically starting to kind of try and learn to kind of embrace the fame and see if she can't make a living off of that fame.
Yeah, I mean, if you spent your whole life doing all these crazy things and you're an amazing storyteller, absolutely go on a tour.
Adam, do you think the Wild West was well and fairly dead by the 1890s?
It depends. It really depends on how you look at it, of course. Like it's like with any historical question, it depends. But a lot of, like we were talking about Red Dead Redemption, right? Both of those games are set in the 20th century. Like I think or 1899, I think is the second
turn
game.
of the century.
Yeah, right around that
and then
turn.
the first game takes place in 1911, and so there's like there's a huge scope, and there's a ton of movies that are set in the 20th century that are westerns that still have a lot of that same theme, and like the idea of this sort of it was for a while, it was like the commons. It was everyone's heritage. Everyone could just go out and take it if they could work hard enough, or if they, but even by the 1870s, we're starting to see these things close down. We have, land speculators are buying up all the land, so it's not affordable for single families anymore. There's competition between like big ranchers and homesteaders who are just trying to build a farm versus like, it's like the Duttons in Yellowstone. If you've ever seen Yellowstone, like these powerful, essentially crime families that are controlling all the land for their own enrichment and squeezing out the little guys. And so like,
that's actually like the main story of Red Dead, is that the cowboy lifestyle is being kind of like modernized out, as being gentrified out of existence.
Like the railroad is pretty established.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, is this a point at which there's like a lot more private land ownership, where you've got like, the Wild West has kind of been conquered and has been at least staked out, or is this still very much like open space, nothing, there's a lot of nothing out there.
Yeah, it depends on where you go, because like different territories and states matured with different like economic like markets and stuff, right? So like Montana is where the ranchers go. That's where like the big ranch and cattle industry starts, whereas that was in Texas before. And as Texas is like industrializing, a lot of ranchers are kind of moving up to Montana, and they're raising cattle up there. And so like all these things kind of move around a lot. But there's also a ton of Western fiction, like the movie and the book Shane is about homesteaders who are trying to be forced out by a powerful rancher, right? And then Shane, this gunfighter, shows up and like saves the day through this precise use of violence, right? And so like there's still, I think there's still like elements of the Wild West that go up into like the 20s, up until basically like the Dust Bowl. And so depending on kind of how you look at it, like we're still having sort of Wild West type disputes today.
Oh yeah.
But the idea of this kind of shared heritage, at least if you're white, this shared white heritage of this land for the taking, as long as you can work, like that's, people are already perceiving that that's being squeezed out by the 1870s, but it's a really long process, and it takes a long time for that to kind of become, the amalgamation in capital that it ends up becoming. So you still have and then there's stuff where it's like, you can see in South America similar things are happening, and a bunch of ex-Confederates went down to South America following the Civil War because that's where they could still pursue slavery and things. They were trying to kind of reignite this great slave republic, and like all that stuff is still sort of going on. And then there's like the Mexican Revolution and the Mexican War for Independence, and like, so it just keeps, the frontier keeps moving. It keeps going to somewhere else where there's still these sort of like, you don't quite have law, and there's no monopoly of violence yet. So like you still have homesteaders versus ranchers versus early lawmen versus the U.S. Marshals versus bandits and highwaymen and stuff. And so that's never really ended, but it's the geography has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it really is. And a lot of it, I mean, it takes a while to die, but and all of these places are specifically evolving and changing with what the railroads coming through there too. So that's kind of changing commerce and introducing, I mean, by the 1890s, we've got a lot of these places we're not squatting anymore. They're actual area, territories or whatever. So people can be there. So Calamity does show up again in actual real history. In about 1895, she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show.
Right down her alley.
Oh, yeah. So she'd hop up on that horse. Go ahead.
Buffalo Bill was an old friend of Wild Bill Hickok. They actually met during the Civil War when Buffalo Bill Cody was like 14. He met, I think, like a pretty young, like 18, 19-year-old Wild Bill Hickok, and they were friends.
Oh my God, you could do a whole cinematic universe off of these guys.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's like the early, again, like the sort of early if you're familiar with Watchmen, the comic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It takes place in a universe where like superheroes are real, so superheroes aren't comic book figures. It's all pirates. And I honestly think Alan Moore really missed the trick when it should have been about cowboys, because that was the thing. That was the pop culture. That was the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When you have you've got, Jack Scratch over here, this plucky, like made up character who rubs elbows with Wild Bill and Buffalo Bill and all, like that absolutely was going on. And like the very first movies that are starting to be made are Westerns. Like it's a huge part of American pop culture. And like, growing up when I did in, the 80s and the 90s, like that was sort of not really present very much anymore. And that was new, right? Like these new sort of versions of these stories were taking over what had been the Western
more futuristic
for a long time.
Yeah.
I have heard a rumor though that the Western is now on its way back in to cinema and to like obviously games. It's always been in games.
Well, everything is a Western. Like if we go back to Star Wars, Star Wars is just cowboys in space.
Yeah.
That's really
I think and everything is cyclical too, especially when it comes to media. Ideas get recycled and brought back around, and I mean, they're remaking all the animated Disney movies into live action now. Lilo and Stitch is the next one, I think.
No way.
See Little Mermaid
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
I know. We still got to see Little Mermaid.
Gary refuses to see it with me. He's like, absolutely not.
That's because he doesn't want us to sing. We're gonna sing in the theater. I know it.
Oh, please, let's do it, and let's be off key and just.
I will definitely
crazy
be off key.
Old women that
you
will be in
bone
the
up
theater
on the
and
lyrics,
make it okay
for
everyone else to sing.
To make this one more up to date.
Oh well, then I will sing quietly a little bit, just to see.
Yeah, that threw me off with Aladdin too. A lot of the lyric changes there.
Oh well, that one makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so it's 1895. She joins Buffalo Bill in her Wild West show. She hops up on this horse and she rides around and she's still doing her little sharpshooting. But there isn't like a lot of consensus with how long she kept these jobs. It was a tour. It was different areas. The records show that she was both touring the country with the Wild West show and also getting fired unceremoniously all the time because she would be rip-roaring drunk while performing on horseback with a loaded gun around children.
Girl. You can't
There's
like
some
social
just for that haven't been invented yet for that.
Yeah.
I want equality. The men can do it.
So during this time she's touring, there's a reporter who recognizes Jane of the comic Calamity variety and agrees to write her biography. Jane, who was likely illiterate, probably dictated the story. So she then has photos of herself and an autobiography that she can sell while she's on tour doing this stuff. I mean, literally, she's like living off of her name and her fame.
Yeah.
Yes, merch is really selling it for her. She sold these embellished autobiographical pamphlets for pennies. And again, wildly inaccurate. I think it was like biography.com or something that I was researching, and they could not stress enough how inaccurate this autobiography is. They're like, it's horribly inaccurate. In 1900, a reporter found Calamity completely entrenched in a who knows how long bender in a bawdy house. The reporter nursed her back to health, and in 1901, Jane was well enough to get a job in Buffalo, New York. It was for the Pan American Exposition, and it paid really well at the time.
Pan
So she
American Exposition.
So
Kinda
she
like
gets to Buffalo. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So it's kind of like, I assume, like a smaller version of a World Expo.
Yeah,
A little bit,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
Okay.
more or
Or
less
like
what
a
they
World's
were,
Fair.
like these
All right.
huge,
The
nationwide
beginning of a
fairs.
World's Fair.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's about as big as you can get as far as fame at that point, right? People came from all over.
Yeah,
And
like
because they
World's
toured,
Fair.
it was
Mhm.
easy to get to it. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So she gets to Buffalo. The event comes up. She gets liquored up again. And she shoots
My girl.
glasses. Yeah, so she shot the glass at the bar. She made Irish cops dance a jig to her quote unquote roaring guns.
That's
Oh
racist.
God, ma'am.
And then stumbled through the town of Buffalo, cursing the entire place.
The real question is, did she shoot at the cops' feet because they were cops or because they were Irish? Because
Oh, great
you
question.
know, that's a very different
Yeah.
reason.
Who would she have more
And
reason
also-
to hate coming from
Right.
Deadwood at that point? Like,
Right.
what's her
Hmm.
experience given her to hate more? Actually, I think she was just drunk and in a really funny mood, and she was like, you know, it'd be really funny. I'm a great shot, and I know that I'm not going to hit their feet, but it would be really funny to see these little fuckers
Yeah,
dance.
make the cops dance.
I just think it's funny that we used Irish and jig together. That's right.
Yeah,
You know, if she was like, now do a jig, that's what makes it racist, because they weren't white
Right.
yet.
I have no idea. That's the story that I read. Again,
Yes.
there's about a bajillion stories. So obviously she was run out of the town. I don't know why. I mean, someone runs through your town and shoots at your cops and says, Buffalo sucks. I'd be like, yeah, it kinda does. Let's go get a burger.
I don't know,
Yeah,
it sounds
get
like she's
out.
from Buffalo.
You want to go talk about it? It does suck, yeah.
Sounds like she fits right in.
So the next that we hear from Calamity, she returns to the Black Hills of Dakota. She really wants to go back home. She's still drinking, and basically she's got very few belongings left. She goes back and she meets up with her old friend Dora Dufresne, and she lives in the brothel that's run by her, and she works as a laundress and a cook. By this time, she's been telling stories about her buddy, Wild Bill Hickok, for like almost 30 years. And Wild Bill Hickok has gone from her good friend to her old buddy pal to her affianced.
Affianced.
Her fiance.
Whoa.
Apparently,
Allegedly.
they were engaged.
Ash.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
That's a big old alleged.
Mhm.
So by this time, Wild Bill Hickok's grave had been pretty fairly well destroyed, I'm pretty sure. She goes back
Yeah.
to Deadwood, and Bill Hickok's grave is like this famous site. And people wanted to come, like when they came into town, they wanted to be a part of it, and they
Mhm.
wanted to take a part of it.
Oh.
I'll let Adam tell this part of the story.
Yeah, so at first it was like he was just in the town graveyard, which was just like the nearest kind of convenient hill. And like if you really want to get into a weird subtopic of like American history, especially, look up stuff about graveyards, because they get moved all the time, and they're like usually put just outside the outskirts of town, and then the town grows, and then they have to pick it up and
Yeah.
move them, and they have to do that
The
over and
bodies
over
and
and over
all?
again, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, what they can salvage of them, it depends on.
Or what people
in
are-
this time,
or
grave
who-
robbing was still big.
Yes, and
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
big part of the Wild Bill thing, because people come to, it was a little wooden cross, and it had a little engraving. Well, not engraving. It was
A placard of
written
some
on it.
sort.
Carving.
And it was
Yeah.
written by Colorado Charlie Utter, which
Ah.
was just a dedication to his buddy, and it said something like "Pard," short and partner, right?
Oh.
Like, you know, we were good friends, and I hope to reunite with you again in the happy hunting grounds. And like that was it, right?
Happy
But then,
hunting
like
grounds.
immediately, people started coming and taking bits of it off as a souvenir, and so like after a while for that, they set up a stone marker, and people were chipping pieces of the stone off.
My God,
And then
people.
like, yeah, so this got so bad that when they actually moved the graveyard in Deadwood to another one, they like put him in a new like fenced thing and told people like don't come in here. But
Yeah.
there's a story, and I don't know how true it is, but there's a story that because of the minerals in the soil, his body had been petrified, so like turned to stone, and that he weighed
Whoa.
like 600 pounds or something like that. They had to get like cranes to take him up out of the earth, which
Whoa.
sounds to me like, I don't know the soil, I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but like it's set
Yeah.
like that's such a perfect image of like Wild Bill, the distilled hero, right? Where he literally
Mhm.
turns to stone, and it's like, and people are like trying to chip off bits of like stone dead Wild Bill, and it's yeah. So they ended up moving in. There's a permanent marker now that's like in a park, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time, like grave robbers and treasure hunters and stuff would